Hello, hello, I am Darkness Jackson, and welcome to the first installment of a series I'm hoping to keep up and maintain as long as people like it, and maybe if people even don't quite like it. I have long since wanted to figure out a way to match my needing an outlet sometimes, and to match also the fact that that outlet needs to also sometimes be things on my head as well as playing games. When I was younger, some of the most serious conversations I ever had with my best friend and my brother happened while we were just playing things like Super Smash Brothers and things like that. So I kind of wanted to have that feeling while I did this, where I was just talking, where I just wanted to talk about something. So I'm gonna be calling this segment because I can't think of anything else to call it. Let's play and talk away, and I hope that's okay with you guys. I hope you guys like the idea, think it's a decent idea to have. So let's get down to the nitty-gritty. For today, I'm playing Rocket League. I'm playing Rocket League because it feels like a good, appropriate game to play for a subject like I'm gonna bring up. I want to be able to cover things like some more serious subjects, but this one is in the middle of how serious. It's serious to me, but it's not like depression seriousness, and that's one of the topics I want to bring up some of this time. So today is how becoming a father changes you, and I'm hoping to reach out and talk to quite a few guys out there that maybe have been through the same boat I have been in. I really hope I don't make these people lose. And let me also say that this is a talk that could just as easily go on a podcast. You're going to hear me say a few things about the game because I'm playing a game, but the game is helping just to facilitate the fact that I want to have a clear mind while I talk, and I want to just have the presence and the feeling as if I'm not just pontificating to some empty box. I want to bring the feeling of I'm talking to my friends, just like I used to while playing over video games. So dads, and by dads I mean like the real dads. Not to put down any parent at all. Incidentally, let me qualify that. Every parent, every biological parent has to make a choice to be a parent. They have to make a choice to actually be not just the biological parent, but actually a mother or a father. You can, or a mom or a dad. I end up calling mother and father what the biological ends up being, and then a mom or a dad what the actual outcome is of their choice of whether they're going to take up that mantle of responsibility and do what's right by their now flesh and blood. And so with that, I want to kind of start it off with saying something here that you know, I kind of felt alone when my wife and I were first talking about having a child, because I felt anxiety that I had never felt before. I felt my mind racing in ways that I had never raced. And if you talk to anyone about me and my mind racing, that's a thing, because my mind is always racing. I always have something on my mind that's just I'm mulling over and is kind of sometimes bothering me, sometimes not bothering me. It's led to me having insomnia and whatnot, of just having things, but it went even further than normal. It went I started becoming worried about things that I had never worried about before, really at that level, and I started remembering things that made me believe that I had things that I needed to take care of that maybe weren't as important, and I had a lot going through my mind. And to sum it up, it was I had a lot of depression issues. I had a lot of anxiety issues. When it came to exactly what it meant for me to be a dad, what my feelings of self-worth and value for being a caregiver, for being even a husband, a dad, a provider, a protector. And all those things started building from the minute my wife and I seriously started trying to have a son, or a child rather, not any sex involved. I never wanted to know the sex of my child until he came out, so there's a reason I have to say no sex involved. So, well, sex was involved, but I mean, anyway, but you know what? When I had all those feelings, I kind of felt alone in it, in the fact that when you went to anything to do with, you know, there's another checkup for mom for this certain period of time in this week, and there's these pamphlets that talk about the things that you're going to be going through because of hormonal changes and this, that, and the other. Daddy never got a pamphlet. Daddy was never told if that was kind of normal for dads to go through, if that was just a thing that happens or if it wasn't. My son was born in 2013, and the study I'm going to be pulling from happened in 2014. Hey, dads out there, if you've been going through a little bit more stress, anxiety, and feeling like it's not you, that it's not quite, maybe it's you, but it's not quite the you that you expected to happen, that it feels almost involuntary in some sorts, you're not alone. And there's a very good reason for it, and I'm going to cover that reason now. I'm going to quickly go through the science because I have a big opinion on this one. You know, there hasn't really ever been really much science on what actually changes physically in a dad, and we're talking about physically as in brain chemistry and how you process information, thoughts, and even to the growth of your brain, because your brain changes. And this study really helped to open up the door to the fact that more studies need to be done on this. Of course, a lot of studies have been done on women, and I'm not going to really go and cover all the studies that have been done on women when it comes to being pregnant and whatnot, because there's a plethora, and that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to talk to a few dads out there that may be being in the same boat as I am, and feeling like while you're trying to be a supportive husband that you're going through something too. And you are. You most certainly are. So there was a study done, 2014, that I hope is going to be expounded upon very, very soon. And there was 16 fathers that were done for the study. And I get to actually talk a little bit while I'm waiting for players to come on. There were 16 fathers, 7 of them new fathers. It makes me sad that the first study that really got people turning their heads was such a small sample size, but it was something, because there was nothing before. Finally, one of the things that sparked it was a lot of psychiatrists were starting to finally recognize that there might be some form of depression that goes along with men, with the dad, after a baby is born. Couple that with the fact that we've known about sympathetic pregnancy issues where someone can be, you know, it's thought that you're so empathetic to your spouse or your partner or whatnot that you're starting to have some of the issues as a man that is expected of a woman. And someone finally put those two things together and said, I don't think this is just all sympathetic, and did a study. And the study had 16 guys, 7 of them first-time dads, and they did brain scans. Just to start off, they did an analysis of their mental state and whatnot, and questionnaires about them, and to figure out who they are. But then they did the important thing that they did to really have a measured study of maybe what's physically going on inside their head. They had 2 series of scans done of their brains. One done 2 to 4 weeks after the birth of their child, and one done 12 to 16 weeks after that. And they found a few things that they really did not expect to find. First and foremost, there was heightened neural activity. That is something that's already been documented in all parents, so I'm going to skip right past that because that really doesn't say anything to what I'm trying to get at. What does say something is that there was growth in the brain and there was recession in the brain. There were parts of your brain that got bigger and parts that got smaller. They found growth in 4 different areas of the brain, or rather 4 different areas four different parts of what controls four different things. I'm stumbling over it because there's more than just four areas of the brain, but there's four things you can kind of group it up into, which is first this striatum. It's that part of your brain grew in these men. That's the part of the brain that has everything to do with reward processing, including reinforcements. So reinforcement doesn't necessarily mean that it's a reward. Reinforcement simply means that something happened and the reinforcement can be negative or positive. Reward processing is an important key thing of one of the things that changed. But another thing was that motivational salience is affected by the striatum. And salience is kind of the ability to have a group of stimuli and pick out one stimulus that's more pertinent or more that has more to do with the situation at hand and being able to focus in on that. The human mind doesn't necessarily have the best time with being able to focus on many things, and we have limited mental faculties, and so it's just a basic adaptation thing to focus your mental resources on on the pertinent data, and then to be able to then facilitate learning from it by processing what's most important and adapting due to that, processing and then adapting yourself due to that information. That is a basic survival mechanism of human beings, or anything actually, to a certain extent. If you can't adapt, you die. That's just kind of what science looks at, how life works. The potential bad effects of the striatum being bigger is that this also is the area of the brain that has something to do with mental and physical addiction. And I'm actually going to get to personal experience and personal struggle with a lot of these things, but I'm going to get through the science real fast. The hypothalamus grew. That's your hormonal control. Hormonal is thought to be a woman thing again, that hormones change for the woman, and it's more of and guys cope with women's hormones changing. They found out that the part of the brain that has everything to do with your hormonal balance grew. Your amygdala and your AAC grew, and that's your emotional processing. Two different centers that has everything to do with how you emotionally respond to it, how you physically respond to it due to the hormones that are released. So we're talking about the physical and emotional response, brain chemistry in general, but the physical emotional response and things that are really actually very pertinent to really talk and think about the fact that these things are changing. One other place that does grow also is the lateral prefrontal cortex, and that is where you're going to find a lot of your memory and decision-making abilities happening. Now, talking about shrinkage, I know no guy wants to talk about shrinkage, and if they do, usually there's a talk of, well, the pool was cold or something like that. Shrinkage. Let's get into that really quick. There's the medial prefrontal cortex and the inferior parietal cortex both had recession in the brain, which are parts involved in zoning out and being able, that ability that you used to have as a parent before you were a parent, where you could just not give two shits about anything and just kind of let things be, and you could relax on the couch and not have your mind raced. Yeah, that's called your default mode network, and that part of your brain shrank when you became a parent. Men, it shrank in you guys, and it's okay that it did so. You have somebody's life in your hands, and your brain needs to be on top of it 100% for being able to tackle that, which means that you need to be zoning in, not zoning out. So that part of your brain gets smaller in anticipation for the fact that you need to be able to be more active and not be zoning out when you're dealing with another human being, another life that is in your hands. One other part of your brain that shrank was the orbital frontal cortex and the left insula, and those are areas that are related to anxiety. That doesn't mean that anxiety went away. What that more or less is kind of telling us is that dads were getting used to, when you first have a child, it feels so fragile, especially if this is your first time being a dad. And there were 7 guys that this was their first time being a dad. You feel like you have a fragile life in your hands, and you do. You honest to God, do have a very fragile life in your hands. But you get used to it. You get used to that bit of stress. You get used to that bit of how to handle that, how to feel like, you know, by the 12 to 14 weeks, you know, after, when this study is really talking about, is when you start feeling like a pro at what you're doing, at least, that feeling like you're not completely lost. And it would make sense. Now, part of your brain that had to do with anxiety shrank. However, we need to quantify this, because there needs to be more experiments and more research is needed on this one fact, because those areas of the brain were still bigger than what would be expected of a normal male, just that was a bachelor or wasn't a parent or whatnot, just normal scans of male brains that were not parents. And this is suggesting that before the baby even came out, there were changes happening in the brain. There were changes happening in the man's brain, the father-to-be's brain, that you know, changes were happening. It's not just the mom that goes through changes, chemical imbalances and physical changes. And so what it really says is that more than likely, that part of the brain was growing in the man from the moment you started to talk about becoming a parent, getting pregnant, all of that jazz. As soon as that became part of the equation, that changes started happening for both parents. And then when, you know, you actually get pregnant and, you know, your wife or your spouse is pregnant with your child, that not only are hormones spiking, but you actually you're having things happening with you also. And you know, it's really something that's telling to say that it's not just that you're adapting to the new way of life that comes with having a child, the way you have to change the way you just live everyday life. It's actually saying that while she has a bigger hormonal spike and she has more chemical changes happening while she actually has the baby inside of her, which are needed to carry a baby inside of you, you know what? He's actually also going through growth and change. So to get back to the anxiety part, these parts of the brain, yes, shrank, but they didn't go back down to what would be a normal, just single guy that does not have a child. They didn't shrink back down to that size. There's still more anxiety involved than beforehand, and that change in your brain started before you even saw your child, which is not something that you think about the man going through, the father going through. So that's the research. And what does this research mean? To quickly sum it up, this research means that there's a number of complex changes that are occurring that are really hard to quantify empirically. It's kind of like psychiatry, where we know the general basis of how chemicals work in your brain, like dopamine receptors and making you happy, blah, 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 things like that. But it doesn't mean that there's one-size-fits-all solutions, because the body, we don't know exactly how every single SSRI and every single SNRI interacts with the chemistry. We have the general idea, but there's a reason that sometimes it takes a few different tries on medication to go through that. You know, even in the cases where you think in general this should work this way, like for example, Wellbutrin, going into psychology, is well known as being a very, very good treatment for both anxiety and depression, because it's an SNRI, which does make a huge difference. And it's thought to not have a lot of the effects that SSRIs can have, especially when it comes to sexual dysfunction. That's one of the biggest things that SSRIs will do to you. Wellbutrin's thought many times not to do that. SSRIs can also raise your blood pressure, and that's not necessarily a good thing, especially if you're trying to treat depression in the first place and treat anxiety in the first place. that's to say that in general, that's a very good drug to go to, but you know what? It doesn't work for everyone the same. And so it's not necessarily, some people will still have sexual dysfunction on Wellbutrin. Some people will still have problems and issues. And that's my way of saying that, you know, this quantifying it empirically is a hard thing to do. It's not something that there's a little bit of guesswork involved, and it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. But what I can say is that there are some things that definitely I can point out, that all of these areas of growth have to do with attachment and nurturing behaviors. Things that dads are not really given credit for having that actually happen to them. Usually the credit is given to the fact that the hormonal spike in women as they're having a child and actually having the child live inside them, take up residence for a while. Those hormonal changes are usually thought to be the reason why, you know, women are so much more bonded in this, that, and the other, and that guys, you know, will never go through that same experience, and therefore they're not having those same changes. But actually, these areas of growth are showing, oh yeah, they are going through these things. Maybe not to the extent, but you know what? They also don't have the baby in their stomach, so they don't need the hormonal changes to the same extent as a man does. And a lot of this, let's get this out of the way, is talking about after the 9 months. After the baby comes out, even though we're including some things about before the baby's coming out, we're going to be talking a lot about what happens, you know, after the baby's popped out. So we're looking at these areas of growth that have everything to do with attachment and nurturing behaviors. We're also looking at the reduced areas that are helping the reduced areas that help you zone out. They're reduced and they allow you to be more vigilant, and so they it's a way of, you know, any parent becoming more vigilant, and it's but it can also lead to compulsive behaviors and anxiety. And this is going to be a little bit more redundant again, but talking about uncontrollable obsessive patterns of thinking start emerging also because of these areas of growth and recession. And these patterns of thinking are not just sometimes hard to control. Sometimes you'll feel like you're unable to control them, which is the definition of uncontrollable. Oh, I just hit that toward my own goal, because I am idiots. And the last thing I want to say, that, you know, this study is kind of finally sparked by the fact that science has only really recognized recently that men are susceptible to a sort of postpartum depression. Hey guys, there is a depression. There is actually now a little bit of a study to go with it, and there's already been studies that start looking at some of the chemical changes that dads go through because of sympathetic reactions to the spouse being pregnant or to the significant other being pregnant. And oh, I'm doing horrible in this game right now. I just talked about, I opened up with feeling like things were changing for me. And let me just finish up with the science real quick so we can skip on to the part that I really kind of want to harp on for just maybe 10 minutes. You know what? Yes, there are significant differences between men and women, especially how their bodies work, how their bodies were meant to work. And of course, some things will be different because there's a big difference in how both men and women go through the process of having a child, because the woman's carrying it. The hormones are needed. But when we start talking about stop talking about the hormonal changes that are different because of her carrying the baby. And by the way, those hormonal changes are really, really needed, because I'm going to tell you something right now. When my son came out, I watched him come out. I watched him come out twice because he made an appearance. He said hi, and then he went back in for a second, and then he came out with a hematoma because of it. That child was not even human color. He was long, stringy. He had way too big of feet. He was covered in a substance. It looked like it could have been straight out of a Steven Spielberg or the production team that made Aliens. It looked, you know what? If I had to go through that much pain from actually having to carry the baby for 9 months, the physical changes that actually physically happen, like, and I mean, even getting down to the nitty-gritty of like the cravings and the back hurting and all that. If I had to go through all of that, I would hope my hormones are a little different, that help me cope and become that more that would help me aid me in the attachment process, in the protectiveness, in the feeling of immediate love on first sight, the feelings of needing to be worrying and protective, because you know what, they after that 9 months they're gonna need a little help that the dad didn't need. But you know, after all that's said and done, after the hormones are starting to change and everything, we're finding that this study is showing that there are more similarities than differences. There are more similarities than differences. Moms, listen please to this. There are more similarities than differences. That guy that's being a father, that chose to be a father and is taking that mantle and that responsibility, that guy is going through a lot of things that you can go through, especially when it comes to the things that guys, there's just the social stigma that goes along with it, that guys aren't supposed to be going through any type of depression because of having a child. They didn't have the child in them. They didn't have all those hormones. Why would they have it? Actually, they did have different hormones coursing through their body. There was a big change. There was change as they became a parent, from the time that they started being a parent to the time this study started, you know, for 2 to 4 weeks out. Another change that happened weeks after that as they became used to being a new parent. Yes, there were hormonal changes. There were changes in the brain that deal with how you process emotions. So you know what? There's a big link right there to why guys would have issues with depression and anxiety, something that's just not talked about. Presumably, we can say that one thing that may not be similar is that depression rates, postpartum depression rates, might be higher with women. However, sadly, I can't tell you that for sure. I can tell you that 1 in 6 women will deal with some sort of depression as a result of their pregnancy. But you know what? This study that I'm talking about is in such infancy that I cannot tell you what for all I know, there's a higher rate of depression associated with the whole thing with pregnancy in men, but that higher rate of depression is a lower grade of depression than what a woman will go through. Or maybe there are fewer men that go through it than women. Is fewer than 1 in 6, but it's greater in general than the postpartum depression that a woman goes through. I wouldn't know, because those studies haven't been done, because it's never been looked at like that before, because pretty much because of a social stigma that those aren't things that happen to a guy. And that really touches me personally, because things happened to me. Things changed. Things weren't quite the same, you know. And I started this off of how becoming a father changes you. Changes you physically, emotionally, mentally, physically. It does change you. And yeah, and speaking of the long-term changes, of the growing and the shrinking, most of these things are the same between men and women. So let's get right into the fact that we've covered that science. Let's finally, and I've got a poor connection issue, let's finally get into what really bothers me about this subject, the fact that there's not enough science behind it. I felt alone. I felt very alone with the thoughts I was having. And there wasn't any science. My son was born in 2013. This study that's finally starting to spark a little bit of recognition that more studies need to be made was in 2014. Now, if there are more studies out there that I don't know of, put it in the comment description and everything. Make it constructive. Dialogue down there. Don't just say, hey, I'm a woman and how dare you say that, blah, blah, blah. I am not downplaying what women go through. I am trying to put emphasis also on, it's not just the women. Hey, there's a bit something else going on too with the guys, and it's never addressed. That so much emphasis is put on what the mom goes through, that sometimes we miss the fact that maybe daddy's depressed, and we need to deal with this just like we would deal with postpartum depression. We've got to address this issue, and so it's frustrating to me that there's not more research on this, because, and mostly the research hasn't been done because it's just downplayed for men. You know what? One of the most infuriating things you can possibly say to me is something that I've heard multiple times. I think we just won because of that last second thing. So I'm not even gonna move. I'm gonna give him a chance to be able to tie this up, and I'm gonna talk to the camera for a second, because this is where I'm starting to get, I get a bit angry about this. You know, I've been shopping in the middle of the day many times. And I've you know, had Rowan with me, of course, when I went shopping. And when I do that, we're good. Okay. So, with that said, I've had people come up to me and listen to this. Listen to how just ridiculous this must sound now that you've heard some of this research I'm talking about. And I'm gonna actually have to exit to the main menu because my connection isn't the best for this. And I'm gonna actually, you know, wrap it up on this screen. And I love this song, so this is a good thing to kind of wrap up the thoughts on, because you know what, I'm in the mode. I'm in the mode that I need to be in to really pontificate upon my thoughts and feelings about this experiment. And I think it would be much more constructive if I just kind of gave this a sidetrack for a second and let the soundtrack just help me out with some background noise. This is. I've been shopping, and I've had a mom or a woman, I don't know if they're moms sometimes, come up to me, and they see my son in the cart with me. It's noon. It's obvious that I am, you know, taking care of my son. And I've had them say such things as, isn't it so, aren't you so great of a husband? You're giving mommy a break. Or, isn't it so nice of you to be able to do that, so to give her some her time? Or, I've actually had someone say, oh, look, it's daddy daycare, as if it were a joke, that we were joking about it. It's not a joke, it's an insult. And my reaction immediately was, how dare you? Really? How dare you? Just reduce my role as a parent to being that of the backup, of the lesser parent, and all that jazz. It's infuriating. I am my son's first teacher. I ended up being the stay-at-home parent, so with that comes a set of responsibilities, and the first set of responsibilities that every parent needs to realize is that you're your son's first teacher. You're your son's best teacher. When they get into kindergarten, my son is in a 2-year-old program now for socialization things, because I am a stay-at-home parent. He doesn't go to a daycare. He goes for 6 hours a week, and it's more socialization. They're emphasizing and they are reinforcing things he learned at home. My son is just over 2.5 years old. He knows his ABCs. He knows how to count past 10. We're getting towards 20. He has one-to-one correspondence, something that, you know, is not my wife is a 2nd grade teacher. They have problems with one-to-one correspondence. He gets being able to take a group of things. He doesn't need to use his fingers to count and things like that. He actually just counts the items. He understands if you take away one of the items that you have a different number of items. You can tell him to take away one and ask how many are left, and he can give that to you. One-to-one correspondence. And that takes time and effort and work. And it's not something that just happens overnight. And it's part of the responsibility of being a parent. And too many parents leave it up to the school system to really to completely teach your kid. You know what? The God honest truth, there's a reason that it's there are legal ramifications for not sending your kid to school, and it's not necessarily about education. School's first and foremost job is socialization into the U.S. way of life. It is socialization into what they have to become adept to become a productive adult. The education is important, but remember, business schools are pretty much a business first. And so we have to realize, well, why are they a business first? If the main focus is education, why is there so much bureaucracy behind it? And I know it's because there's federal spending and there's state spending and there's all these other things that go into it. But you can actually see that those different hands that are in this, that come in from the government, really mean that the government has a good say on what should be happening in this structure. And in this structure, there should be socialization skills, and socialization skills that lead to a productive adult. And one of the best ways to lead to a productive adult is to make sure that they understand what the general moral code of living in this country is, what the general rights and wrongs of living in this country is. And that is what school is best at doing. What a parent is best at doing is being their child's first teacher. What a parent's job is to do is to have the school reinforce what they learned at home. That when my son is coming home from kindergarten, 1st grade, and 2nd grade, I should be asking if they learned something new. And if they learned something new, I should be expounding upon it. And I want to talk to him about what happened in school. But I'm going to be relying on the school for more socialization things, because when he's home with me, we're going to be still in day-to-day life being engaged, in activities that make sure that he is learning, developing, growing, because that is my job because I'm a dad. That's my job because I'm a parent. And I know that's like something that, you know, stay-at-home moms too, like, you know, let's fist bump on this one. That's our job. That is our job. And it's sometimes undervalued because you think it's the easier path. It is not the easier path. It's by far not the easier path, because you know what? The stakes are higher. When that is your job and you fail at that job, you didn't just fail a job that you can go find another job. You failed a life that is dependent on you, that looks up to you, that needs you in so many different ways. When you fail at that job, you're failing a part of you that is now out into the world, a part of you, something that is genetically half you. It's different. There's a big difference, and that it's flustering. Mommy isn't naturally just the better parent just because she carried the child. And usually when this conversation comes up, there's a negative discourse that comes up about it, because usually the conversation only comes up when we're talking about when daddy's absent, when daddy isn't there, what happens when daddy's presence is not found in the child's life, what kind of bad things happen. And you know what? It is easier for the dad to walk away from that kind of situation by I want to say effing to you that, you know what? If the mom were the one to walk away, the same similar things, the same detriments to the child would be there. They would be there. It's just that there's not as much study behind it because it is easier for a dad to walk away. But you know what? There's so many different things that have to do with that. You know, tragedy strikes. Maybe mom isn't in the picture because of tragedy. Maybe for some reason mom left. Maybe the postpartum depression for her got so great that she changed and she blah blah blah. There are reasons, but it's just not talked about. I hate it that when dads come into this situation as being a parent, it seems to only ever be as the secondary backup to mom, or it comes to be as a negative view. That pisses me off. Royally pisses me off. And I went through all of that science to show that we're in the same boat here. You know what? We're in the same, maybe the boat isn't the same color, maybe it's not the same size, but we're in the same lake, and we're in the same situation. We're looking past that brief 9 months to the later 18 years until they potentially can get out of your house. We're in the same boat, and when you make the decision to be a parent, it has an impact, and that decision is very real, and that means you two are, when you both make that decision, it's not one parent is better than the other. You are on equal ground. Now we're seeing biologically, not only are you on equal ground, but in your commitment to it, you're on equal ground. So just because, you know, it's the stereotype that mommy should be the parent and this one makes me want to bring up a quick story of, I had to see this in my own life. I had to hear about the stories, and I was too young to understand what was going on. And I'm hoping I get all the facts correct in this story, because it's a story that I hope hits home. That there are changes that happen, that not only with the changes that happen, that sometimes the roles are reversed of what you would think. There's a man named Steve that my biological father knew. Steve was a good and decent guy. Steve had an estranged partner. I can't remember if it was his wife or not. And when it came down to custody, she won custody. She should not have won custody. But we're talking about over 20 years ago. And for a man to win custody of the child when there's a separation, you know, full custody, or even having the dominant custody where it's not just every other weekend we see daddy or every weekend we see daddy, it is damn hard to come by. That it was just thought that it was more beneficial if the child stayed with the mom. It's still thought in a lot of studies that it's more beneficial for the child to stay with the mom, but it's thought that because of the social stigma and the lack of research behind dad staying around with the child. So Steve didn't win custody. He only had partial, and the wife should never have had custody of this child. This child was beaten. This child was beaten by the mom senselessly. And the dad Steve did everything he could to prove that the mom was an unfit parent, and that his child was in danger. How heart-wrenching can it be to know that your child is in danger and no one is getting your back? He went to the courts, and it went so far as to say not only did the courts just kind of brush it off, they said, hey, you know what? It's more likely that you're the one that's beating your child, and you're just trying to push it off on mommy because you're vindictive or something like that. And I can't imagine ever being in that situation. I cannot ever imagine having to try to prove to a court that I didn't beat my child, somebody else did. I need to get them away. I need to save them. I need to save their life. And that's what it came down to for Steve. He found that the beatings were getting worse and worse, and no one had his back. No one got behind him and helped him out. No one saw that he was the parent that made the commitment to be a dad and had it all together. And just because it was thought that the mom was the better parent, he was just kind of shoved off to the side to watch his kid go through this. And it came down to that he killed her, not his daughter. He killed his estranged partner and took full responsibility for it, and had to go in front of a court and say, you wouldn't listen to me. You wouldn't listen to me. And I had to do what I had to do to save my child. Better that they go into a foster system that is horrible than for them to have no life at all. I apologize. I had to step away. That's a horrible thing to have to think about, and I can't even say that story again. I need to skip right past it. But I hope that points out what kind of some of what I'm getting at, that's really frustrating as a dad, looking at the landscape of other dads and knowing that the undervalued potential of a dad, the undervalued potential of a dad who chose to be a dad. And this is where as a dad, I want to just be half of what my dad is. And my dad is named Rick Jackson. He came into my life after my biological father and mother split up. My mom was raising us, and he came into our life and chose to be our dad. He chose to be our dad, and it's a choice, and him choosing that is proof that it's a choice. He chose us. He chose a mom with baggage, and he chose that the baggage was the children. And he is German and Hungarian gypsy. He's about as white as you can get, and it's two white parents now with two half-black kids. And he chose that. He chose us. He chose us. And he chose to be a dad, and he chose to step it up. I want to be half of what my dad is, because my dad proved to me that there's such thing as choice, that there is such thing as that it's not all left up to biology, that sometimes there are good men out there who do good things simply for the fact that that good thing needed to be done. And he's not a perfect man, but I'm going to tell you right now, in the generation that I am in, if I can be half of what he is, I am going to be head and shoulders above every other dad I run into. And that is no exaggeration of what this man is and what he means to me. To choose to be a dad, the choice of being a dad, and what that choice entails, and what it should entitle to the dad. What it should, the entitlement that should go with that choice should be the respect that should come with it, and the knowledge that there are things that might need to be addressed, that come up with the struggles of being a dad, a father, a dad. So anyway, to start wrapping this up, I saw a quote that I liked when I was doing a little bit of research on this, and the quote said something to the effect of, becoming a parent is like discovering the existence of a strange new room in a house where you already live. And I really liked that, because it was in contrast to the statement that I just absolutely hate, abhor, and wish would die a burning, fiery death, which is when it said that becoming a parent changes everything. And that statement is almost always backed with, you become a totally different person, blah blah blah, and it changes everything. I hate that statement. I hate it with a fiery, burning passion. Here's the reason I do. Let's really think about that statement. I went to my 10-year high school reunion, and I met a lot of people that I hadn't seen. Met a lot of people I hadn't seen in 10 years, and a lot of the conversations that we had picked right back up as if we hadn't been gone for 10 years. It just made it for interesting conversation that we had more to talk about, and a lot of them were now married with kids, and my friends like Nick and Dana, they were the same people that I remember, and I got to talk to again and hang out with again. But they both have kids, and I'm sure it changed their life in a lot. But they were still Nick and Dana. That statement kind of really doesn't do justice to what becoming a parent really is, because it kind of things do change, but that statement kind of unnecessarily exaggerates things that are not necessarily as significant, while it can also take some of the it takes some of the smallest changes and exaggerates, and while it takes some of the biggest changes and understates them. And it doesn't do justice, because you can't just wrap up what it means to choose to become a parent in something so simple as a statement of it changes everything, because it doesn't. That's just the long and short of it. And if you think differently, this is the one time where I'm just going to say, you're wrong. It does not change everything, because you are still you. And you are going through things. Obviously, you're physically and emotionally, you're going through things. You're going through differences in how your routine in your life has to be. But let's really look at this. Let's look at me for a second. I started making some bad choices when the talk of being a parent came up. I started making some of those bad choices. And there were some good choices in there too, but some of them, because all of a sudden I was feeling this new sense of being paranoid, of being protective. I was feeling insecure about my ability to provide and to actually be a dad, whether I was even up for the challenge. I already was having these thoughts, but these thoughts were becoming obsessive. And for me to say a thought is becoming obsessive is like saying the water got wetter, because I already have a problem with going overboard with thoughts, and it really did so much that I tried to compensate, and I tried to make up for it, and I tried to be overly protective where I could be. I feared even the fears that I had that are semi-grounded and semi-not grounded in our generation anymore, of having a mixed race baby. And I was paranoid down to the fact of I didn't want to know the sex of my child, because I was afraid with all of these insecure thoughts, feelings of all these thoughts that were being obsessive and couldn't go away. I was afraid simply knowing if my child was going to be a boy or a girl would have me start down this line of prejudging them before they're even finished making fingers and toes inside of mommy. my son is perfect for me because I never thought of a different way that he could have ever been. My son is perfect for me because I really started trying to understand myself, and that's one of the things I did right. I really started trying to understand who I was and who I am and what that really means for me as it relates to becoming a dad. And I realized that I would start doing things like going, well, now I know we're gonna have a girl in 2 months. Well, if it were a boy, then, you know, we could have done this differently, and or, you know, vice versa. Instead, the biggest thing I did was I painted his bedroom in neutral colors, and I did a darker teal and a gray accent wall, and decided that if it was a boy, that the colors would work perfectly, and we could add some black and white to it, some damask patterns, and if it were a girl, throw pink all over the place, and it also works. That's how I solved that problem with every parent saying, how do you plan? I figured it out. It was pretty simple. It was very important for me to accept the reality I was given instead of the reality that I wanted to manipulate in my head with the what ifs. And that came for me starting to have realizations about myself and what I needed to do. That doesn't mean I was necessarily changing, and I'm getting to that because there's a big that doesn't necessarily mean I was changing, because I think my choices were different than if I had been in a... I mean, I made choices that quite obviously, I would never have made those choices if the thought of an upcoming baby was involved. But I look back on it, and I look back at all of the mistakes and the good things and all those choices I made as I progressed as trying to become and accept responsibility of being a dad. I look back on it, and I found out after really, really thinking about it, I'm not sure. I am honestly not sure if it would have turned out any different. If I had not gone through the chemical changes in my brain, if I hadn't had parts of my brain expanding and collapsing, for lack of better terms at the moment, if I hadn't gone through all of that, I'm still unsure if, given those set of circumstances, if I would have come to some of those same conclusions, come to those same choices, and decided the same things. And in realizing that, I realized something very powerful about myself, which was being a parent didn't truly and honestly change me. Becoming a parent, taking that mantle of responsibility on, going through those now researched physical, mental, emotional, chemical changes that are going through, it didn't change me per se. It amplified me. It amplified who I was. It's almost like I became an exaggerated version of myself, an exaggerated version of the person I already was. It's almost as if I became a hyperbole of who I already was. As if I tried to make this hyperbolic version of myself, and I tried to act it out in real life, and then I came to the realization that that hyperbole was actually who I am now. And that's to say that the part amplified, exaggerated, is to say that those things were already there. And this process brought some of those things and amplified and brought them to the surface, and it made me think about things that I had already thought about and thought I made decisions about. It made me think about those things. It made me rethink about those things, and a lot of those things I had to rethink about. I had to rethink about in the fact that I couldn't have as much gray area as I had before. I'm the first one to say that this world is not made of black and white. It is made of shades of gray. Throw in random 50 Shades of Grey reference here. It is made of shades of gray, and when you realize the flux of no true issue being straight black and white, very, 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 very few issues in my mind are straight black and white. Very few, as in I could probably count them on my fingers. No toes required. Like murder, bad. The end. And how hypocritical of me to try to say that one when I just talked about the story of Steve. There's a shade of grade right there. I didn't have the luxury of having a middle ground that I stuck to because I was too much of a coward to make a choice one way or the other, because I was too much of a this, that, or the other, because I had my reasons for wanting to stay politically correct in things. It brought all of those things that were already inside of me and made me reevaluate them and come up with a true idea, opinion, solidified it so that I was prepared to take this mantle on. So it amplified me, and it amplified me to a certain extent that I started finding out not only my strengths, but more importantly, I started finding out all of my weaknesses. And there is a true strength in that. There is a true strength in that needs to be covered in a separate video, because truly knowing who and what you are, which is very much helped by becoming a parent. When all of those things become amplified, you learn the mettle of a man and a woman through hard times and through difficult decisions. You learn what they're made of. And that saying comes from the fact that you learn of what they really are and what they always have been. And once you put them in the situation, you get to actually see it play out, because you have to see the real them step up and come to the plate. Whether that real them is someone who wants to put on airs on a facade, or that real them wants to make wrong decisions or good decisions, or do whatever, who that person is and how they'll truly respond steps up to the plate. And the only other quick thing I'll say about that is that I've seen tragedy right in front of my eyes, where who I am has become amplified. That amplification comes because, in part, you are now responsible for another human being's welfare and life. And it's not just any old human being, it's someone who is half you. If you fail them, you're failing the life that you made. It's not just like failing a friend, it's not even just like failing family in general. It's a very specific thing you're failing, because choosing to be a father, to be a dad, choosing to take on that mantle also says that you're choosing to protect them from everything you think is dangerous. And you are taking on their life as your responsibility to such a dramatic extreme as, yes, you're choosing to make sure that they will live, they will continue to live, and they will live in a way that is suitable for them to be living in. And one of the situations I was in was only a year and a half ago that I came across an accident, and I've had prior training through Boy Scouts and through other things. If you want to know about my background when I was in the Boy Scouts, it wasn't just like, oh, what you think of stereotypical Boy Scouts. I was really very much into learning as much as I could through that program. Order of the Era, blah, 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 all these other things you actually had to be... I didn't just take it lightly, and it wasn't just some club for me. It was a place where I could actually learn from trained people. Because for some of these times when you went to summer camps or whatever, they didn't just bring in some random person reading from a book. They brought in trained people. Boy Scout of America certification for being a lifeguard is much harder than Red Cross. You have to swim 1/4 of a mile for Red Cross straight to be a certified lifeguard. For Boy Scouts, you need to swim 1 mile, and it's not going to be in a pool. It's going to be in a lake. I had to swim 1 mile in a lake with a rowboat right next to me to pull me in just in case anything happened, or to give me a buoy just in case I needed. But if I needed that buoy, I failed. And so I say that some of those things helped with my experience of knowing all of this and whatnot, of having at least not just a general knowledge, but a pretty good wraparound of what it means to try to help in a traumatic situation. Not only the mental part, my psychology degree helps with that, but the physical part, the actual physical trauma that happens after something like an accident. And I came across this accident, and there's a man that was hurt. And in that instant, when I looked at the situation, I did what a parent ends up doing. I immediately told myself, I'm going to save this guy. and his life is in my hands, and no one else is here that can do that. We were in the boonies, so it was even more. I didn't say hopefully he'll survive. In my head, all of a sudden, it was he's gonna survive because I'm going to save him. And I'm gonna make sure I can stop the bleeding. I'm gonna make sure that nothing is damaged, no further trauma is incurred because someone inexperienced is trying to deal with this. I'm gonna make sure that he has every possible chance, and it's not just giving him every possible chance. In my head, I had already said he is going to live because I'm going to save this man, and I failed because he died. I was the last person he saw, because his wife and his daughter. It's not uncommon for people who are close to someone who's dying. It's not uncommon for them to not be able to even be in the room when it's a hospital situation, when life support is cut off, for example. And nurses can definitely back me up on that one, that it's very, very hard for them to be there for the last moment to see the transition from life to death. And I was there for that transition. And so I actually have something to compare being a parent to that helps me really grasp what this really means. When I stepped up to that plate and I said, I'm going to save this man, I didn't change. I became the amplified version of myself that was needed for that situation. I adapted. I talked about the parts of your brain that change and grow that help with adapting, with motivational salience is what I brought up with striatum and whatnot. But the ability to adapt to the situation, but all of that was already inside of me, it was all already there. So one of the benefits of becoming a parent is getting that amplified version of yourself, not that changed, different person of yourself. And I'm not getting into the whole, yes, your routines have to change because you have a life that you have to take care of. Some of the things you like doing, you can't do anymore. That doesn't mean you stop doing them. It just means that you have to transition away and find a nice balance. Kind of like me doing what I'm doing this very second, trying to find a balance between being a dad and being me, and making sure that I keep myself at a certain place that I can properly be a dad. Pluck the plank from your own eye before you try to remove it from someone else's. Biblical. I don't mean to get religious on it at all, because that's just a very good metaphor of it's really hard to help someone else when you don't help yourself. And part of helping myself is doing things like this, but part of what helped me help myself was when I became very cognitive of who I truly am, what I am made of, the metal of this man, what it was. And it showed me, it put in a spotlight all of my faults. It put in a spotlight all of my shortcomings and all of my limitations. But putting that in a spotlight has been the biggest strength I've ever been given in my life. And many times it's hard to remember that it's the biggest strength I've been given when it feels like a weakness so often. There's a great strength in that, because when you know your limitation, you know when you need to reach out the helping hand. When you know where your fault is, you know how you need to build to get over that fault. When you know where your shortcoming is, you have a starting place to build. You can't begin a journey when you don't even know where you're going. It's kind of like being told to follow the map when you're not given a compass, where you have an idea of where you need to go, but as an experienced outdoorsman, I'm gonna tell you right now, give me a map and no compass and give me thick foliage, I'm going to be trying to pull every trick out of my book to try to figure out and keep my bearing instead of going around in circles. If you don't know where those shortcomings are, you do not know where to start building. And it's not necessarily changing who you are. For example, in my photography business, one of my shortcomings is not having enough time to do all the editing. And knowing that shortcoming, I hired a company to help with the basic edits, with the cropping, the white balance, and the exposure. The things that aren't my personal style on my photos, but the things that very much matter into the end product. They took that off of my plate because I knew something needed to be taken off my plate. I'm getting to a point in the business where I know something else needs to be taken off my plate, but I had to run into that shortcoming of I was failing. I was misstepping. I was not meeting expectations, and from that I had a starting ground of, well, how can I start meeting those expectations? So I think the last thing I just want to say is something that I heard Bill Clinton say when he was talking to Stephen Colbert, and the last week the Colbert Report was on. Go check out his he took over the Late Show, and he's amazing. He's got an hour platform now, and it's his own self, not a hyperbole of a Republican, pretty much. He talked to Bill Clinton, and he said, you have so many Clinton initiatives. How are you so selfless? How do you do that? How do you devote so much time and work into being selfless? And he responded to him and said, the Clinton initiatives and everything I'm doing are the most selfish things I've ever done in my life. I've never done anything more selfish in my life, because I'm a parent and I have children, and I have children who are going to be entering a world, and I want to make an impact on that world, so I have the means wherever necessary to make sure that they grow up in a world I want them to grow up in. If that's not the epitome of what it means to take on the mantle of being a parent, I don't know what is. It is the most selfish act you will ever take on, and it's selfish because you want it completely without regard to the feelings of necessarily others. You have this drive and desire to be selfish, the selfish desire to make your child above all others, to be well adapted and to grow up and to be the best person they can be, and the best success story of being a parent is looking at your child and realizing that maybe you were a success story for your parents. Maybe you were the thing that your parent hoped you would be, but that your child is better than you. That your child is your success story. That for as good as you could have been, your child is better. That is the goal, and that's the mantle of taking up as a parent. So, that's my way of just trying to end this off of saying, hey, dads, there's a lot that goes behind being a dad, and I apologize for every media outlet that forgets to include you in the topic when the topic of parenting comes up. I apologize for every single politician who has kind of skated right over your issues when they have to when it comes to. I apologize for the social stigma. I apologize for stereotypes and misconceptions, and I apologize for the fact that there is not more research out there to show others and shed light on the fact that you making the decision to be a dad was a big decision, and it had not necessarily, I want to say the word repercussions, but it's not necessarily negative things. Some of them are a little bit negative, but it had, that mantle was not a light mantle to put on, and you shouldered it anyway, and you're carrying on anyway, and props to you for doing that. Now, I've said a lot here. If you disagree with me, which would be pretty much all of YouTube, because YouTube is pretty much made of trolls at this point, but and that's a joke. Please don't troll this, because if you think I'm wrong, if you think I'm incorrect, if you think I'm misguided, if you think anything, if you think I'm right, if you want to add to the conversation, comment below. And let's make this a debate. Let's try to make this, if there's going to be any conversation, even if it's just between me and 3 other people, because I don't have that big of a fan base, if this is going to be something that we're going to talk about, let's have a debate about it. And a debate is where both people come with an open mind, but a sound argument. I shouldn't use the word argument because I'm about to use it again. A debate is where 2 people come in with an open mind and sound reasonings, and they're able to expound upon those reasonings, and they have not just a subjective, I mean, personal experience does help color their opinion, but they also hopefully have something more objective that helps to solidify their argument. Logic 101, you don't just go by the subjective nature of things. You try to bring an objective perspective into any debate, any argument, to be honest. I don't want this to be an argument, and an argument is just where 2 or 3 or 4 or 1,000 people yell at the top of their lungs until everyone's blue in the face and no one came with an open mind and no one's opinions changed. And that is not where this needs to go. So if you actually listen to all of this, thanks. I think I might split some of this up and make a shorter version of this video to be able to put out just my personal kind of gripes and everything, so that someone doesn't have to sit through an hour of getting through this, because it is a bit long. But you know what, I can't really make it any shorter than that. So I look forward to talking to anyone who's willing to talk about this subject, and it's something that I need to get off my chest, because it's something that I struggled with a lot of that, and there was just no reassurance or anything telling me that this was actually normal, that it was normal for me to be going through this. There was nothing out there to tell me that, and that to know that you're not alone in something is so powerful. Also to know that you're not the only one. And dads out there that are watching this, and potential dads, people that are thinking about being a dad, you're not the only one. You are just not the only one. So so that's enough of me talking. Subscribe, like, comment, do all those cool things. And today, this is I'm Darkness Jackson, but this is Big Papa Panda Steven Jackson, the dad, signing off.